everybody. Welcome to the Living Well podcast with your host, me, Liv Hill. All right, today we are going to talk all about the basics of macros. We are going to talk macros 101, breaking everything down, giving everyone a deep dive into what macros are. So we're going to talk all about that today. Before we get in the conversation, I'm recording this podcast in September, and I don't know if you guys have seen all of the posts out there on social media, all of the memes that says, October or August 31st, it has, everybody in sun clothes and like laying out in the sunshine, and then head into September 1st, and that switch has flipped, and now it's all things fall. Everybody's got their fall out and ready to go. So I've been enjoying those. Fall is also a time, or specifically in September, is a time where people really start to focus in on their health a little bit more. And I see this happen, honestly, more in the spring and then also in the early fall than I do in January. I think in January, a lot of folks are just tired of that resolution of I'm going to take care of my health, I'm going to lose X amount of weight. I feel like that shifted away from January. And again, when we enter into seasons like spring, where it's like a new season, something fresh, something new, folks kind of start saying, hey, I really want to get control of my health. And I see that a lot too when the kids go back to school. We get Labor Day behind us. And, I think it's very forward thinking. I always think that anytime anybody wants to take care of their health, that's a fantastic, page to turn and realization. But also, getting yourself into a really good position before the holidays is a game changer. That makes all the difference in the world, because once we start on those, late November, December holidays, that is where most folks gain their weight every single year, is through that holiday season. And so we don't gain as much weight just through the traditional part of the year, but we really can gain anywhere from 5 to 8 pounds every holiday season, is what the research says. And then you take those 5 to 8 pounds and you multiply that by 10 years, and you've got an extra 50 pounds on you. You don't know where it came from, and a majority of that does come through the holiday season. So when folks come into coaching and they start focusing on their health in September, they're really locking in some foundations and habits before the holidays get here, so that way they are at a good space. Holidays come, they don't get that holiday weight gain, and then they feel better going into the new year. So if you are in that camp, know that we are here to help you, and also you are in a great position to say, you know what, I really do want to lock in on becoming healthier, getting more energy, getting stronger, watching my weight, whatever that is for you, in this time, because this is just a monumental time to be able to do that. So let's talk about macros. Of course, you guys know here in coaching, we do coach under a macros philosophy. We are not driving in macros all the time, macros, but that is the philosophy that we use here at Liv Hill Nutrition for your nutritional periodization, which we've had some podcasts on that before, so you can go back and listen to that. So let's talk about it. You've probably heard someone say, I'm counting macros. You've heard someone say, I'm keeping up with my protein. And so what does that mean? Is it just another diet trend? Is it the same as low fat, low carb, Atkins, keto, carnivore? Is macros just another fad or another trend? Is there something worth knowing here? So we're going to break down the difference between macros versus some of those other trendier terms that you've heard. When I started tracking macros, it did sound complicated. I remember when I really got deep into macro tracking, I was eating so many egg whites. I was eating like egg whites like crazy. And of course, like protein bars and protein shakes weren't as popular. And I just remember me and my husband had this huge spreadsheet out. It was enormous. It was like this Excel spreadsheet. I was trying to figure things out on my own, figure out what my calculations should be. It was an undertaking to figure out what my macros were. Now, being educated, I'm like, we can knock that out of the park pretty simply. But doing it on my own, I was trying to figure that out, and it felt so complex and so difficult. And I just remember eating a ton of egg whites. I felt like that was all that I was eating, because they were lower calorie and higher in protein. And then, of course, once I started settling into that more, once I gave myself some learning time with that, it became much, much easier to track macros. It became very easy to understand. And it was a framework that helped me build balanced meals. And that's really what macros does, is it helps you build balanced meals for a balanced lifestyle. And that's what we want. We don't want fads that come in, hit or miss. We want to have balance. We want to have moderation. We want to have a lifestyle that we can sustain, right? And so you guys know my story, lost 150 pounds over a decade ago, and balance and moderation is what has allowed me to keep that off. And macros was the gateway from where I was at to where I am now, being able to sustain that. So we're going to get into some practical ways, macros made simple, so that you can understand what they are, why they matter, and how you can use them. All right, so let's jump in. So macros are nutrients your body needs in large amounts, and they provide you with calories. So all of your macronutrients roll into calories, and there's three big ones. There's protein, which is the builder, and protein repairs tissue, keeps you full, supports your hormones, maintains your muscle. So protein is the builder. Carbohydrates are the fuel. So carbohydrates is your body's preferred energy source. It's for your brain, for your muscles, keeps gas in the tank, helps you through your lifting, through your training. Carbohydrates are our friend. And then fat, and fat is the protector. So that supports our hormones, especially for women, our brain health, our joint health, vitamin absorption, being able to absorb the vitamins that we're eating. Those all come through fat. So the big three: protein, the builder, carbohydrates, the fuel, and fat is the protector. So think of it this way, is calories are your total budget, and your macros are the categories you spend your money on. So you've got your total budget, but then you've got your macros, and like one might go for your rent, one might go for groceries, one might go for entertainment. So you've got different categories on ways that you're going to spend your overall budget. So everyone is already eating macros, and so that might help to start thinking of it that way. Every single food that you eat is made up of some combination of protein, carbs, and fats. So you're already eating a macro diet. That every food has some combination of protein, carbs, and fats. Just knowing how to use those macros and how to spend your energy budget more intentionally is what's going to make the difference, all right? So why do macros matter more than calories? Why are we looking at macros instead of just like traditional calorie counting? So when you understand how to use macros, you can learn to balance your energy and avoid blood sugar crashes. So when you're eating, pairing what I like to say is no naked carbohydrates. So not having just carbohydrates by themselves, but when you pair your protein with your carbohydrate, basically taking your carbohydrate and covering it in protein, that's pairing those together, that can help your blood sugar crashes. And that works for everyone, but especially for women who are in perimenopause, postmenopause, that makes a big difference there, because blood sugar issues are things that you can run into when you're in that season of life. Eating an adequate amount of protein and carbohydrate will help you with fat loss, muscle gain by controlling that intake. It also builds more satisfying meals. So when you have protein, carbohydrate, fat, when you've got those laid out there, you're balancing those out. You're going to have less hunger and fewer cravings. And then it automatically just makes food more flexible, which is my favorite part of macros. I mean, of course, I love no blood sugar crashes. I love those things, but I don't necessarily feel those, on a day-to-day basis. But what I do feel is that nutrition is more flexible. So it makes food not a good food or a bad food. And that's what I have learned from macros, and what we teach in coaching is that there's not a good food, bad food, that every food is acceptable. Every food is okay to eat, and learning how they fall in those macro categories helps you enjoy those foods without the guilt, because you've learned how to manage fun foods like cake, donuts, pumpkin spice lattes. You've learned how to balance those within your macro budget using those foods along with some protein foods and working in some fruits and vegetables as well. The biggest misconception for macros is that, this was an old one. I feel like this one's kind of being put to bed for right now anyway, is that macros are just for bodybuilders. So a lot of folks think, if you're counting macros, you are training for CrossFit games, you're lifting super heavy, you're in a high rocks, like you're doing all of these difficult things. And so that's why you need to track macros. That's not true. Macros are for everyone. Another misconception is tracking macros is obsessive. And it can be. So let's spend some time on these two topics. One, that tracking macros is obsessive, and that two, you have to track forever. So let's talk about this. Tracking macros can be obsessive. I have worked with people who are very obsessed with tracking macros. They'll pull their phone out. They'll spend 20 minutes just trying to Tetris a meal out and reconfigure things and getting really lost in the weeds of macro tracking. They can take it to the extreme. We can take anything to the extreme. I am a huge fan of tracking in general. And there's a lot of different philosophies and thought processes on that. I subscribe to anything that you want to be successful at, anything that you want to see your progress at, you want to track, whether that's your budget, whether that's your grades in school, how many books you've read for the year, do we have enough money to go on vacation, have we budgeted for that, where am I at in reading the Bible for a year. Anything that you want to take progressive steps in, you want to track. And so normalizing that when you're talking about tracking your food, you're not talking about tracking it for a way to feel guilty. It's for awareness, and it's so that you can see your progression. So we sometimes look at, if I have to track my food, then that is a negative thing. And I completely disagree with you. I think it brings a ton of awareness, understanding what you're eating, understanding the macros in that, understanding the calories in that. Huge. I tracked my food for 2 years consistently. Every day for 2 years, I tracked my food. And that brought me so much awareness that ultimately ended me up into intuitive eating. So, because I understood the dichotomy of food. Now, we'll talk more about that on another episode. You guys know how I always do. I start with something, then lead into something else. But tracking macros doesn't have to be obsessive, and it doesn't have to be forever. And so, again, I've been on my journey for 15 years. I tracked consistently for 2 years straight. Then I've tracked for periods of 6 months for about 2-3 different times in that 15 years. So I'm tracking when I want to focus on a certain aesthetic goal, but outside of that, I eat intuitively. I've learned to eat intuitively because I've tracked the macros. So it's a tool. It's 100% a tool. It helps you learn portion sizes. It helps you learn what foods fall into what macro category. So big fan of that. And it's a misconception that if you are tracking macros, that you have to be obsessive about it and that you have to track forever. So, and that it's just for bodybuilders. Those things are definitely not the case. So let's get into some detailed macro breakdown and some food examples. All right. So let's go back to protein. Protein is the builder. And so it helps repair muscle, it's recovery, it helps with fullness. So let's talk about some examples of protein. So that would be lean meats, chicken, turkey, pork tenderloin, any type of lean ground beef, that's my favorite, chicken thighs, all of that runs into protein. Also fish and seafood, tuna, salmon, shrimp, those things run together. Eggs, and then egg whites, those are definitely protein. Then you can get into dairy, which is going to be Greek yogurt, cottage cheese. You can do just about anything with cottage cheese these days. Those both fall into the protein category. And then, of course, there's some other things that you can weigh out as well that are supplements that help with protein. So like protein powders or ready-to-drink shakes. I think that those are fantastic as an entry point into eating more protein. So if you are very unsure about how to eat protein, if it feels overwhelming, protein powders, ready-to-drink shakes, I think having one of those a day, fantastic way to get your foot in the door on protein. I like Legion protein powder. Legion protein is one of my favorites. Clean Simple Eats is great. You can grab those at Target. There is OWYN, OWYN, which is plant-based. Those are great, but starting with one of those a day is an easy way to get in around 30 grams of protein to kickstart you on your day. You can also do some plant-based proteins, tofu, edamame, those types of things. So you can definitely get some plant-based protein in there as well. When you are eating more protein, you want to look for just proteins that are higher in fat. Again, is that how you want to spend your calorie budget? It's not that they're bad, but things like ribeye, sausage, cheese, those have protein, but they also have a higher fat content, so they're going to have a higher calorie content. Again, doesn't mean that we don't eat them, just being mindful of things. All right, then let's jump over to carbohydrates. And poor carbohydrates get such a bad rap, but I'm a huge fan of carbohydrates. We need them. They are our primary energy source for our brain and for our muscles. So when people think of carbohydrates, they think of donuts, they think of Hostess cakes, they think of all the air quotes bad food that no one is supposed to be eating, and carbs just get such a bad rap. But your carbohydrates also are found in all of your fruits, all of your vegetables, all of your whole grains. So when we're looking at things like rice, potatoes, oats, bread, pasta, which is fine, corn, peas, those starches are going to help keep us full and satisfied. When you're looking at things like fruit, apples, bananas, berries, pineapples, those are a great source of fiber. We want fiber in our bodies. Fiber helps us go to the bathroom. Fiber helps with cholesterol. You can also look at non-starchy vegetables like broccoli, peppers, zucchini, spinach. Definitely the cruciferous vegetables, which are your broccoli, your cauliflower, those types of things can help from a women's standpoint, just feeling better with menstrual cycles and things like that. So we won't go too deep into the functional side of things, but those cruciferous vegetables are great for every woman to have in their diet, every man as well, and then also working in some green vegetables. So there are times as a functional nutritionist that me and then the practitioner on staff, Miriam, will look at lab work, and people are just deficient on basic vitamins. So if they were eating more carbohydrate in the source of fruit, vegetables, that would pull up their values and help them be more nourished from the vitamin standpoint. So definitely don't overlook what carbohydrates can do for your body. Now, there's also going to be things that fall into the carbohydrate: pizza, pastries, fries. And so those are just going to have more calories in them. Again, not a good food, bad food situation, but just like we were talking about some of the ribeye and the sausage and the high cheeses under the protein category, in the carbohydrate category, just be mindful. Like, there's going to be things that are going to be higher in carbohydrate and calorie together. Pizzas, pastries, fries, those have carbs and fats, and that's what makes them more of a air quotes killer for you, is because they have that heavy fat laid in there with it. Really, pizza has more fat than carbohydrate. So when you're looking at, villainizing some of these things, it's actually, they're heavier in fats versus carbs. So just, again, this is where tracking is very, very helpful, and understanding these things are very helpful, because once you track your food for a season, you can understand where the budget is being allotted, and you can make choices that line up with what your goals are. So let's talk about fats. And so if you're like me, grew up in like a super low fat era, everything we're eating is low fat, is SnackWells, low fat string cheese, those types of things. But fat is needed for our hormones. It's the protector. So for our hormones, brain health, to absorb the vitamins that we are taking, you want fats in your diet. Again, perimenopausal, postmenopausal, great source of help to have healthy fats in your diet. So thinking things like avocados, nuts, seeds, more fatty fishes, those are great things. And again, we want a good amount of fats to help us with bone health, joint health, all of those types of things. And fats are just a great helper for that. So there are also some that are a little bit of mixed macros, and that's kind of what we talked about before, like nuts and nut butter. So like peanut butter, that actually is mostly fat. So it's not a very high protein source when you look at it. People are like, protein in peanut butter. Not really. It's mostly made up of fats, and that's where that drives from. Cheese, that's a little tricky because it does have a higher fat content and a lower protein content. Does it have fat and protein? Yes, it's just a mixed macro. Beans and lentils, same thing under mixed macros. Those are higher in carbohydrate, but they also have some protein. So we've got a mix of those there. Whole eggs, protein and fat. So they've got a decent amount of protein, but they also have a decent amount of fat. And then yogurt, definitely high in protein, but just watch for the added sugar on those. So there are some things that are mixed macros. So you may hear that, peanut butter, cheese, beans, eggs, yogurt, those are all high protein. And they all do have protein, but we just have to be mindful of what's being mixed in with them just from a nutrient standpoint, and seeing that they may have some protein, but they may also be higher in carbohydrate, and they may also be higher in fat. So again, tracking your food helps you understand these things. So let's talk about a practical approach. If you're like, okay, I'm new to macros, I'm trying to understand this. You don't want to have the Excel spreadsheet out. Jeremy and I spent, I remember 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon filling out a spreadsheet to figure out our macros. So if you're like, I don't even know where to begin, I don't know what to do, know that I was there myself too. So one, you can always come over here and ask us questions. We are happy to help you, happy to walk you through things. So that's always an open door for you. If you want to just start learning, you can also just start tracking your food and just paying attention to things. I like MyFitnessPal. That's easy to use, pretty simple. You can scan barcodes in that. Just track your food as you're normally eating for 3 or 4 days and see where you land and start understanding the macro profile. What you can also do if you want to just try something where you're eating more protein is focus on protein first. So at every meal, start with some protein and then work in some type of carbohydrate, some type of veggie, and a little bit of fat. And so you can start building your plate that way. So you've got in your protein, you've got in your vegetable, you've got in a little bit of healthy fat. And see how you start feeling eating with a more protein forward approach. Not just protein, not just egg whites like I was doing, and definitely not just tons of shakes and bars. But if you are going to have a protein shake, have your protein shake and eat an apple with it. That'll give you some protein and some carbohydrate. So start doing some of that, mixing some of your meals up. And when you're looking at making a balanced meal, start with that protein first. That's going to be the first thing you're going to put on your plate, like a piece of chicken. Then put something on there that is, a vegetable, chicken. Put some carrots on there. You'll have some carrots, and then throw something else that you want on the side, maybe a ranch dip for your carrots, right? So you can do something like that. Super simple, balanced plate, and start thinking about your meals that way, and that will help you gear towards a macro approach, all right? So as a wrap up, reminding you that macros don't have to be difficult, macros don't have to be hard, but it is going to be the gateway to help you have sustainable, not just fat loss, but sustainable nutrition, getting away from more good foods, bad foods, looking at every food is equal, and learning how each food fits into your budget. So think on some of those things. If you have questions, the door is always open. You can always come over here and ask us at any time. And I'm excited to see you guys get in there, track your macros a little bit more, learn more about macros. And if there's any questions that you have that you want covered on a next podcast, definitely let me know. All right, you can also check out our social media site, which on Instagram is liv.hill.nutrition. There are tons, probably 40 guides. If you'll search back through the feed, there's 40 guides in there that are going to show you different meals with different macros. Use those as jumping off points. There's meals you can make at home. There's restaurant meals. There's fast food meals. Just kind of dig through there. There's a lot that's in the feed. But if you can go back through there, you can start to see some foods and meals and guides that are based towards macros. We also have our cookbook, Start Living Well, which has balanced plate options. So you're going to see a ton of balanced plate ideas, 5 ingredients or less. If you're wanting to take that balanced plate approach, that would be the jumping off point for you there. And then, of course, we've got tons of blogs and other podcasts over on the website, livehillnutrition.net. So thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I hope that it has been helpful for you. I am excited to keep educating you guys, and thank you again so much for sharing this. It means the world to me. If you guys could leave a Google review or a podcast review, I would really appreciate it. It helps spread the word so that more people can learn about stewarding their bodies to be their best health. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode, and I look forward to catching up with you all next week. See you later.